This bill would allow the president to target for App Store elimination an entity that directly or indirectly operates a, quote, website, mobile application, desktop application, or augmented or immersive technology application, unquote, which I'm pretty sure includes VR and gaming apps, possibly AI, but anything that permits users to, quote, create an account or profile to generate, share, and view text, images, videos, real-time communications, or similar content, unquote. Similar content, that could be anything.
I am so damn tired of being lied to. I don't think I can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies, but I'm not gonna buy it anymore.
Hello, my friend, and thank you for listening to the 289th episode of Congressional Dish. This is your host, Jennifer Briney, and this episode is going to be about the Not a TikTok ban bill, because there were so many people that sent me messages about this bill once it passed the House of Representatives. And so I read it for you. I will let you know exactly what's in it. But I do want to let you know that this is a follow-up to some previous episodes we've already done, because this whole TikTok is a national security threat debacle has been going on for a while now. And so last year I produced an episode called Restricting TikTok. The restricting part of that was actually a reference to a bill called the Restrict Act, which is one of the proposals for dealing with TikTok. And that episode also featured a hearing in which the CEO of TikTok testified to Congress. And so I gave you the highlights of that hearing. And then also I do recommend listening to the Twitter Files episode, because I'm going to reference it a few times, because this whole issue is about more than that one singular app, TikTok. This is about social media and government power and censorship, and it's about a lot of things. And if you're not aware of how the government is currently interacting with other social media companies, you might not grasp the full context of what is going on in this episode. So I do recommend listening to those two first if you haven't already. But this episode is really about a bill that's been branded as the TikTok ban bill. But the bill's real name is H.R. 7521, the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. And this thing just moved through the House of Representatives at lightning speed in a Congress that's done damn near nothing for 15 months. So the speed of this is really quite shocking. This bill was introduced on March 5th and passed the House Energy and Commerce Committee with no hearing, which means that no experts were asked to testify to its real-world consequences. Well, that vote happened 2 days later on March 7th, and the vote passing it out of the committee into the full House was 50-0. The bill then passed the House of Representatives 6 days after that on March 13th, with so many people voting yes that it was able to pass via an expedited process that requires 2/3 of the House to approve it in order for this whole get around the rules process to work. This is a process that's usually used on uncontroversial bills, and what's amazing to me is that it worked. The bill passed with 352 yes votes to 65 no's, and the 65 no's were 50 Democrats and 15 Republicans. But this overwhelming majority saying yes to this bill means that the vast majority of representatives in both parties were on board with the ideas in this bill, which makes me wonder how many of them bothered to even read it. Because the fact is that this bill is controversial, or at least it should be, because while clearly aimed at TikTok, with the goal being to force the Chinese partial owners of the extremely popular app to sell it, this bill would apply far more broadly than TikTok. This bill, big picture, isn't really about TikTok. It's about the power to censor what apps and websites and games Americans are allowed to access in the United States. And in this episode, using the text of the bill itself, I'm going to show you exactly who would get that power and how it could be used if this bill were to be passed by the Senate and signed into law by President Biden, the president who has already said that he would sign it into law if it made it onto his desk. In telling you about this bill, I'm also going to play highlights for you from the House of Representatives floor debate, since that was the only debate that was had on this bill, so that you can get a sense of why this bill is not only being passed, but so quickly, and because it was clear which members read the damn thing and which ones didn't bother. Because unlike so many bills that I've discussed on Congressional Dish over the last decade, there is no excuse for not having read this one. Because a lot of the bills that we've seen over the years have been thousands of pages long with only a couple of days between introduction and the vote. And so sometimes you're like, yeah, it's just impossible for people to read this. But even though this bill is moving extraordinarily quickly, it was available for a very short amount of time, the text doesn't require more than a few hours to fully understand. It's only 16 pages long, and there was only a couple of times that I needed to dig into current law to figure out what changes would be made. Most of this bill is written in plain old English. And so if you've ever been curious about what it's like to read a bill, this is a good one to check out for yourself as a first-timer. You'll see everything I'm about to tell you right there in black and white. And if you want help, I've included my highlighted PDF of the bill in this episode's show notes for you, along with links to previous episodes and all of the articles and sound clips that I used to create this episode. I give you all of my sources like this for every episode because, well, first of all, trust is earned, especially in this age of bullshittery, but also because I want you to see these things for yourself. And in this case, I want you to see how easy it is to spot the red flags inside this bill so that you can understand just how unacceptable it is if your representative didn't take the time to read it before voting. Because no matter what your thoughts are on TikTok or the Chinese government or the CCP, anyone who reads this bill will see that those are just the first targets of this bill. If it becomes law, they will not be the last. And so let's start our examination of this bill with the author of it, Republican Representative Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, in order to get an idea of why this bill was written by him. Here's a portion of his House floor speech on March 13th, right before the vote.
TikTok is a threat to our national security because it is owned by ByteDance, which does the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. We know this because ByteDance leadership says so, and because Chinese law requires it. This bill therefore forces TikTok to break up with the Chinese Communist Party. It does not apply to American companies. It only applies to companies subject to the control of foreign adversaries defined by Congress. It says nothing about election interference and cannot be turned against any American social media platform. It does not impact websites in general. The only impacted sites are those associated with foreign adversary apps, such as TikTok.com. It can never be used to penalize individuals. The text explicitly prohibits that, and it cannot be used to censor speech. It takes no position at all on the content of speech, only foreign adversary control. Foreign adversary control of what is becoming the dominant news platform for Americans under 30.
So clearly the author of the bill, Mike Gallagher, is concerned by Chinese ownership of TikTok, and considering that he is the chairman of the Republican Party-invented House Select Committee on Competition with the Chinese Communist Party, that isn't surprising. But his framing of the bill, it isn't entirely wrong, but I don't find it entirely honest. So, one of the things that he says that is true is that it's not going to be used to penalize individuals. It can't be used to penalize individuals. That's crystal clear in the text. But he says the bill is focused on foreign-owned entities and can't be aimed at American companies. That's not true. And the part of the speech that really caught me was that last sentence. The fact that his concern is that a foreign adversary controls, quote, what is becoming the dominant news platform for Americans under 30, unquote. Now, this caught my attention because Representative Gallagher, who's someone I've kept an eye on because we went to the same high school, so he's kind of been on my radar, but he wrote an op-ed that pissed me off on November 1st titled, Why Do Young Americans Support Hamas? Look at TikTok. And that title alone made my blood boil because wanting the bombing and starving of Gaza's residents to stop does not equal supporting Hamas or what Hamas did on October 7th. But the fact that this member of Congress would, in writing, accuse the millions of TikTok users who are seeing for ourselves the destroyed buildings and bulldozed communities and dead babies and blown off body parts and mass graves in Gaza and taking a stand against it and calling us because I'm one of them, calling us brainwashed, I think it explains not only why he wrote this bill targeting TikTok now, as the assault on the defenseless population of Gaza by Israel continues with no end in sight, but it could also explain why this bill is moving at lightning speed through a Congress whose leadership in both parties, 100% of them took money from AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, to help them win their last elections. And it's not just the leaders of the party that are taking money from AIPAC. In total, AIPAC, a lobbying organization for a foreign country, gave money to 342 members of this Congress to help them win their last election. That's about 64% of this Congress taking money from an organization openly representing a foreign country that is openly interfering in our elections. And so the author of the bill is concerned with what information we're being shown about that country's war via TikTok's algorithm. And then, on top of that, there was a behind closed doors meeting with spooks in early March that also seems to have had an effect on these people. Here's Representative Larry Bouchon of Indiana.
After hearing from national security experts last week, it is clear the prolific use of media platforms controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and other foreign adversaries poses a danger to our country.
And because that meeting was behind closed doors and not in a public hearing, which never took place, I can't tell you what the spooks said that got our representative so freaked out. But whatever it was, it got this bill to move, and fast. And so because TikTok is the main target of this bill and the debate around it, we do need to take some time to examine the TikTok aspect of it before I get into why the entire TikTok debate is besides the point when it comes to this particular piece of legislation. So TikTok. TikTok is an app that I think we're all aware of because we have someone in our lives that is constantly on it. But this is an app generally used for wasting time that says that it has 170 million users in the United States. And its parent company is, well, some of it, is a Chinese company called ByteDance. Now, ByteDance was founded in 2012 out of an apartment in Beijing. Its founder was then a 29-year-old software engineer whose vision was to use algorithms to analyze and provide content according to user preferences. In 2016, ByteDance launched the app Douyin, which is a super popular app in China. And in 2017, the following year, the company then launched the international version of that same app. The international version is known as TikTok. Now, whatever that algorithm does, because I'm not on TikTok, I don't use it, I'm not addicted to it. But whatever the algorithm does, one thing is certain. It addicts people like digital heroin. We all know TikTok zombies, or maybe you are a TikTok zombie yourself. Someone who literally can't take a shit without a scroll session. And like all addictive things, ByteDance's addictive products are extremely lucrative. ByteDance was valued at $268 billion in December. And that company has no interest in selling off its most lucrative products. But because China has a relatively new privacy, or I should say lack of privacy law, that requires Chinese companies to turn over information to the Chinese government on demand, or at least that's how it's been described in the United States. I actually have no idea what the Chinese law actually says or how to find that out. But our lawmakers are being told that Chinese companies have to turn over information to the Chinese government on demand. And because of that, our lawmakers are concerned that because ByteDance is a company partially owned by a Chinese citizen, Americans' data is at risk of being collected and somehow used by the Chinese government. And so privacy is one of the two main reasons that TikTok is being branded as a national security risk, although I do have to mention that the American public has been yet to have been shown any evidence of TikTok's alleged national security risks. But when it comes to privacy, as we examined in detail in the Congressional Dish episode Restricting TikTok, TikTok has been working with U.S. regulators to wall off Americans' data from China in order to make it physically impossible for any data demands from the Chinese government to be fulfilled. TikTok and U.S. regulators are calling this attempt to wall off Americans' data Project Texas. And so here's Shu Chu. He is a Singaporean national who grew up in Singapore. He is not Chinese. He studied economics in the United Kingdom before working at Goldman Sachs for 2 years. And he then moved to the United States to get his master's degree at Harvard Business School. And while a student there, Chu interned at Facebook, and he is now the CEO of Facebook's competitor, TikTok. And so as the CEO of TikTok, Chu testified to the House Energy and Commerce Committee about a year ago on March 23rd, 2023, about Project Texas, and this is what he said.
The bottom line is this. American data stored on American soil by an American company, overseen by American personnel. We call this initiative Project Texas. That's where Oracle is headquartered. Today, U.S. TikTok data is stored by default in Oracle servers. Only vetted personnel operating in a new company called TikTok US Data Security can control access to this data. Now, additionally, we have plans for this company to report to an independent American board with strong security credentials. Now, there's still some work to do. We have legacy US data sitting in our servers in Virginia and in Singapore. We're deleting those, and we expect that to be complete this year. When that is done, all protected US data will be under the protection of US law and under the control of the US-led security team. This eliminates the concern that some of you have shared with me that TikTok user data can be subject to Chinese law.
Project Texas has been in creation with the cooperation and supervision of CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. CFIUS is a Treasury Department-led body which reviews the national security implications of foreign investments in the United States. And it has the power to block foreign investments in the United States, to require mitigation measures, as it's currently in the process of trying to do with TikTok, or force a sale of assets. CFIUS has been working with TikTok for years after the Trump administration tried to ban TikTok in 2020, but the courts shot down Trump's ban because ByteDance was not given proper due process. The CFIUS process is the proper due process. But there have been disagreements in the CFIUS negotiations. Now, CFIUS operates in secret, and even after their decisions are final, their decisions are often kept secret. But in 2022, we did get a peek into the negotiations because of a leaked draft agreement between ByteDance and CFIUS as it was being negotiated at the time. And we now know that the key points of their disagreements were that CFIUS they had quite a few demands. They wanted to examine TikTok's U.S. facilities, records, equipment, and servers with minimal or no notice, and TikTok would have to pay for those audits. In some circumstances, the government wanted to require ByteDance to temporarily stop TikTok from functioning in the United States. And ByteDance's attorneys appear to be most vehemently against provisions that would permit the U.S. government to unilaterally change specific parts of the contract in the future at any time with no notice. And who would agree to that? And so basically, if finalized, the 2022 draft agreement would mean that TikTok would be subject to significantly more government oversight than domestic competitors like Meta, X, and YouTube. And as we know, at least some of us Congressional Dish listeners know, in the World Trade Organization, which China is also a member of, it is internationally illegal to treat foreign companies differently from how we treat our own. And so the demands being made by CFIUS, aka our government, are problematic. And for their part, ByteDance wanted language that would prevent the U.S. government from demanding changes to TikTok's recommendation algorithm simply because it recommended content that the government does not like. And, this algorithm has always been the key sticking point for ByteDance. And from the Twitter files, we know that our government often makes requests about content that our government doesn't like. And so what I can tell you is right now, we don't really have any updates post-2022 from CFIUS because CFIUS is prohibited by law from discussing ongoing matters. But we do know that in March of 2023, which was a year ago, CFIUS contacted ByteDance and requested, did not demand, but requested that they sell TikTok or risk being banned in the United States. Then shortly after that, the TikTok CEO testified to Congress in that hearing that I highlighted for you in restricting TikTok. And then in November of 2023, the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary Yellen, confirmed that the deal between CFIUS and TikTok had not been finished, which tells me that it was still ongoing. But now Congress is getting involved. And the way I see it, there are really two problems when it comes to TikTok. One is data privacy, but the bigger problem, as we saw in the draft agreement, appears to be the second concern, and that is TikTok's algorithm. Specifically, who writes and controls the algorithm that decides what pieces of content each user will be fed next. And the thing about TikTok's algorithm, it's different from some of the others when you think about social media companies. TikTok doesn't own its algorithm. TikTok's algorithm is developed by engineers who work for the Chinese parent company ByteDance. And ByteDance considers the secret sauce that makes up their algorithmic magic to be a crucial trade secret. And it does appear that no other app has been able to create an algorithm that addicts people quite as effectively as ByteDance has. ByteDance isn't even licensing their algorithm to anyone else, which could earn the company many more billions of dollars. And the New York Times has reported that China has issued regulations that appear designed to require government review before any of ByteDance's algorithms could be licensed to outsiders. And so that might be a reason why. But regardless of the reason, ByteDance's algorithm's recipe is secret, which means that selling TikTok to an American owner would either require ByteDance to sell their most valuable trade secret or sell TikTok without the underlying code, without the algorithm, which is kind of like selling a quesadilla without the cheese. TikTok without the algorithm, well, it's Reels, a cheap knockoff that no one is all that into. It's all about the algorithm. And when it comes to the algorithm, Congress is clearly concerned that the wizards who control it will be able to control mass messages to the American public. Here's Democratic Representative Raha Krishnamurthy, who is a proud co-sponsor of this bill along with Mike Gallagher.
Last week, under the leadership of the chairwoman, and the ranking member, they brought up for consideration our bill before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. On the morning of that vote, TikTok delivered a push notification and a pop-up to thousands of users across the country. They used geolocation data targeting minor children to then force them to call congressional offices in order to continue using the app. And in doing so, these children called and they asked the question, what is Congress and what is a congressman? This influence campaign illustrates the need for this bill.
Now, I find it fascinating that his response to getting a lot of first-time communications from constituents was not, this app is important to my constituents, but instead, this communication app is communicating about its own survival to its users, so the app has got to go. That push notification from TikTok is being branded as a backfire by the DC brains, but I see it as yet another example of these current members of Congress showing contempt for the wishes of their own constituents. But regardless of how we feel about it, members of Congress are concerned by the algorithm and the ability of TikTok's owners to communicate directly or indirectly to its users, many of whom are the American people. Now, this is not a TikTok-specific concern. The Twitter files showed us in detail how old Twitter was having meetings with government officials and changing what we would see in our feeds based on their feedback. But then a weird billionaire bought Twitter and renamed it X because he's weird. And now I hate X's new algorithm, which keeps showing me messages from Fox News parrots who I don't even follow, and which shows me the same posts over and over again. I've also long hated Facebook's algorithm, which has decided that I want to see certain people's information and posts more than others, and their algorithm is always wrong. For example, there's a girl I went to high school and college with who, I liked enough. We weren't besties, but we certainly had no hostilities with each other, nothing that would cause either of us to mute or block each other. And I was curious what she was up to recently. I just assumed that she never posted anything since I hadn't seen her face in years. But I decided to go creep on her page and discovered that she posts all the time. Facebook just doesn't show me her posts despite both of us choosing to be Facebook friends. The algorithms, they're a problem. And in some way or another, most of us seem to hate them. And so if the algorithms are the key problems with all of the social media sites, which they seem to be, if a main problem is that random code wizards are controlling what we do and do not see and warping our senses of reality, then a holistic solution might be algorithm transparency, as in don't let them tinker with what we see in secret. We could require that all of these companies make their algorithms public so that other wizards who understand code can at the very least tell us how we're being manipulated while still maintaining the company's abilities to operate as they please. And we can choose for ourselves whether or not we want to be manipulated by this social media company or that social media company. But that holistic path is not the path our lawmakers are choosing with this bill. Instead, they're choosing to expand the government's power to delete entire platforms from American existence. And so to start us off on our examination of the bill itself, here's longtime former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
First of all, this is not a ban on TikTok. I'm a grandmother of teenagers. I understand the entertainment value, the educational value, the communication value, the business value for some business on this. This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe. A winner. A winner.
Ugh, well, despite that botched, ridiculous pun, Nancy Pelosi is correct. This bill does not ban TikTok. Instead, it makes it illegal to help TikTok be provided to United States consumers, and it does so in two ways. First, the bill makes it illegal to distribute or update, quote, foreign adversary-controlled applications, unquote, in a marketplace. In other words, the bill would make it illegal for Apple and Google to provide baddie apps in their app stores. The bill would also make it illegal to provide internet hosting to foreign adversary-controlled applications, which in other words means it makes it illegal for Oracle or other hosting companies to provide baddie apps a place to store and manage their data. Now, this reading of the bill is confirmed by someone I know for sure has read and analyzed every word of this bill, Republican Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky.
Who's going to be prosecuted by this bill? Is it ByteDance or TikTok? Will they be taken to court? No. I mean, they're the target of this, but how do you elicit or effect a ban on them? By prosecuting Americans. The only way you can ban TikTok and the other companies from being here is to say what this bill says, which is we will bring civil action, the government will bring a civil action suit against you if you so much as host them here. If you have an app store that allows them to be here, you are an American or an American company and you will be the target of this bill. Those are the only people who can be pursued under this bill. And I know it's in order to go after TikTok, or so they say.
And the civil penalties against the companies who distribute or host the baddie apps, companies like Apple, Google, Oracle, the fines against them would be enormous. The fines are $5,000 times the number of users of the app. So TikTok says that they have 170 million users in the United States. But just for ease of math, let's say they actually have even a fraction of that. We're going to go with 100 million users. At 100 million users, if Apple or Google were to provide TikTok or updates to it in their app stores, or if Oracle were to host TikTok's data as it's doing, each company could be fined $500 billion. $500 billion each. That's an absurd amount of money. Apple and Google, they would still be able to exist after that fine, although with significantly fewer assets. But Oracle would be completely wiped out. And so it's obvious that the wise business decision would be for all three companies to delist and stop updating TikTok via the app stores and to stop hosting TikTok's data. So it's true what Nancy Pants said. The bill does not ban TikTok. But by making it financially stupid to do business with TikTok for the American essential services that TikTok needs in order to operate in the United States, TikTok would be impossible for Americans to access. So it's not technically a ban, but the effect is the same. Unless, of course, the owners of TikTok use the provision that allows Apple, Google, Oracle, and other similar companies to get out of those fines, which is the provision that says distributing, updating, and hosting of the app or website would not be illegal if a qualified divestiture is completed within 180 days of this bill becoming law. And Representative Raha Krishnamurthy of Illinois, Democratic co-sponsor of the bill, told the other lawmakers,
This divestment requirement is not new. It's not without precedent. When the app Grindr, a popular LGBTQ app, was acquired by a Chinese company, and the United States government determined that sensitive data of LGBTQ members of the military and U.S. government officials got into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party, they required divestment. This happened quickly. Why? Because Grindr was a very valuable social media company. The same is true with regard to TikTok, and there will be no disruption to users, just as there was with Grindr.
But the value of the company is not why the divestment happened quickly. The divestment of Grindr happened quickly because Grindr was not protecting valuable intellectual property like ByteDance is protecting their algorithm. Also, Grindr was not originally a Chinese company. This is a completely different situation. The Chinese gaming company that bought Grindr in two separate deals, one in 2016 and one in 2018, did so without submitting the purchase to CFIUS, the Treasury Department entity that examines foreign investments in the United States for review. And so after the fact, when CFIUS conducted a review, they concluded that the Chinese government could blackmail individuals with security clearances, or its location data could help unmask intelligence agents. And so CFIUS ordered the Chinese company to sell Grindr and gave them a June 2020 deadline to do so. It was an order, not a request. And the Chinese company willingly complied. And so that's one way that this is not the same as the Grindr situation. Grindr was not invented by a Chinese company. It was purchased by one, and it didn't get the purchase approved by the U.S. government first. But ByteDance invented TikTok and its algorithm. This is not the same thing. And on top of that, Grindr was just I don't know how to describe Grindr. I'm not on it. I've heard it's for gay sex, and I'm not going to go down that research rabbit hole because I don't want my computer to be feeding me pop-up dick pics for the next forever. But I do know that there wasn't anything technologically special about Grindr. But ByteDance is trying to protect a secret algorithm, as the algorithm is the thing that makes them different from every other competitor. ByteDance invented a thing, and asking for this divestment, it's a much bigger ask. Again, ByteDance would either have to give away the secret of their invention, which would lower its intrinsic value significantly, or they'd have to sell TikTok without that algorithm, which is a cheeseless quesadilla. TikTok without the ByteDance algorithm is not the same TikTok. That is a disruption to users, as the app will not be the same. And so comparing this to the Grindr divestment, it's not a fair comparison. And it's not fair to promise TikTok users that the app they love will not be affected by a divestment. Getting an inferior product after divestment is a very real possibility and a very real effect on users. And the authors of this bill should at least be honest about that. They should also be honest about the targets of this bill, because so far we've been focused on TikTok and Grindr, both companies with Chinese ownership. But like I said before, this bill is much broader than TikTok and even the Chinese. Because the bill doesn't just apply to Chinese-owned companies. It applies to companies owned by a, quote, foreign adversary country, unquote. And the bill links to a list of countries that are listed as foreign adversary countries in U.S. law. China, of course, is one of them, but so is Russia, Iran, and North Korea. In that part of the law, the list of the official foreign adversary countries can be amended at any time by future Congresses. And so this would apply right now, as of the list today, to 4 countries, not just China. This would also apply to more companies than ByteDance and TikTok, even though they are specifically named in the bill. But this would also apply to other companies that are determined by the president to present a significant threat to the national security of the United States. And so the process for the president, and the president alone, to target a company that is not TikTok for a roundabout effective ban using the new powers in this bill would be that he would have to notify Congress 30 days before making that determination that the company's product is a national security risk. No proof required, just has to say it. And then he has to issue a public notice. He would also have to give Congress a classified description of what would be needed to be divested in order to make distributing, updating, or hosting the company's product legal. And so basically the president, and not just President Biden, but any future president, would have to just say a company is a national security threat in writing, and 30 days later, the clock starts ticking on the owners of the company to sell it, or else Apple, Google, and the internet hosting companies, many of which are American, would be hit with crippling fines. And in reality, even though the bill gives the company 180 days to sell, the clock is really determined by Apple, Google, and the internet hosting companies because it's really their asses on the line. Just think about it. If a future target company were less popular than TikTok and fewer people would be outraged, how long do you think Apple, Google, and other companies would keep that app or whatever in their stores, knowing that $500 billion could be on the line? And then there's also something missing from this part of the bill, which is that there are no new avenues for Congress, even after they are notified, to stop a presidential determination after receiving the information from the president. The president just says it's a threat. The end. Which Representative Sidney Comlinger-Dove of California, she's a Democrat, she cited this as a key reason for her voting no on the bill.
This bill would greatly expand the executive's authority to ban tech companies with zero congressional oversight. I cannot sign a blank check to some future president who would easily and dangerously weaponize this legislation to profit in silence.
And notice that she said it would expand the executive's authority to target tech companies, not apps. And I know why she said that. It's because this bill doesn't just target TikTok. It doesn't just target apps. This bill would allow the president to target for App Store elimination an entity that directly or indirectly operates a, quote, website, mobile application, desktop application, or augmented or immersive technology application, unquote, which I'm pretty sure includes VR and gaming apps, possibly AI, but anything that permits users to, quote, create an account or profile to generate, share, and view text, images, videos, real-time communications, or similar content, unquote. Apps, websites, immersive technology, gaming, anything that allows us to create and share text, images, video communications, or similar content. Similar content, that could be anything. The only limiting part of this provision is that the website, app, game, or whatever has to have more than 1 million monthly users in 2 of the last 3 months before the presidential determination. So it has to be a little kind of popular. And people who were in favor of this bill even admitted in their speeches that this bill could be applied beyond TikTok. Here's Representative Frank Pallone, a Democrat of New Jersey.
While this bill establishes a national security framework that could apply to other applications, much of the public attention is focused on TikTok.
And here's Representative Brett Guthrie, a Republican of Kentucky.
I was asked, does this just affect TikTok? And no, it's any foreign adversary or any app that is owned, controlled, or unduly influenced by any foreign adversary. We must protect our national security and help keep America's private data out of the hands of our foreign adversaries. I urge support of this bill, and I yield back.
They didn't seem at all concerned that this could be used in the future against other websites, apps, games, and whatever else allows us to communicate and share content via a company that is only partially owned by China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea. Because that's another problem. This bill does not even require even a majority share of the company to be foreign adversary controlled in order to be a target of this bill's provisions. To be defined as, quote, controlled by a foreign adversary, unquote, according to this bill, a foreign person, company, or combination of people and companies have to directly or indirectly own only a 20% stake. Now, in my world, controlled should mean a majority share, 51%, which would mean that that company or person would be able to outvote everybody else and actually control its decisions. And 20%, that's a whole hell of a lot less than 51%. That's a lot less than a controlling share, which means that the company doesn't even have to be actually controlled by Chinese, Russian, North Korean, or Iranian people or companies to be classified as controlled by a foreign adversary. And so my concern is, let's say a company is 80% American owned and 20% Chinese owned. Do we really think the Chinese side is the controlling party there? And how can we be sure that companies we consider American won't be targeted if such a large share can be American or another nationality and still be considered controlled by a foreign adversary? I don't think we can. And I think that's a loophole wide enough to fit the moon through. And Representative Warren Davidson, who's a Republican of Ohio, he caught this too. And he figured out why they set it at 20%.
The people sponsoring this bill today claim that the real issue is ownership. But who owns this company? It's not 100% owned by ByteDance. 60% of it's owned by investors, including American investors. 20% are owned by the founders, and 20% are owned by employees, over 7,000 employees. The company's headquarters is not in China. It's in Singapore. And the American user data isn't housed in China. It's housed in Texas, controlled by a database owned by Oracle.
20% is owned by the founder, the only fully Chinese entity on that list. So in order to use this bill to target TikTok, they had to set it at 20% because that's the amount that is truly Chinese. If they set it any higher, like at 51%, a true majority share, then this couldn't be used against TikTok. And if you want to target TikTok, target TikTok. But to make a 20% direct or indirect foreign ownership threshold the permanent standard for targeting apps, websites, games, and other tech platforms for roundabout elimination going forwards, this is a truly reckless and short-sighted way to make laws. Because this will go beyond TikTok, and it's not hard to see why or how. Here's Representative Warren Davidson of Ohio again.
So if we think we can address the privacy concerns, what's left to address? Frankly, content moderation. Remember before Elon Musk bought the crime scene at Twitter? It was all a conspiracy theory that these algorithms were silencing and canceling people. You guys are crazy. No, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, he did keep it operating with 80% fewer employees, but what we found is a lot of the employees were trying to do content moderation, shape who sees what and how they see it, which algorithms are used, how does it promote certain people and filter others. So really what you're saying here is if you're not fully engaged with America's three-letter agencies in content moderation, we plan to TikTok you. And this bill isn't just limited to TikTok. It's a coercive power that can be applied to others. Apps like Telegram, Tor, things that provide privacy would be targeted by this bill.
Now, Tor was created by Americans with U.S. government funding and is now a U.S.-based nonprofit, so I think that one's safe. But Telegram. Now, Telegram, if you're unaware, is an encrypted messaging service that's good enough that the CIA uses it to securely communicate with its foreign agents. But we, us peasants, can also use it to send encrypted messages to each other. In fact, Telegram was used by a bunch of the January 6th idiots to plot their bumpkin raid of the Capitol building 3 years ago. But Telegram was invented by a Russian billionaire and his brother in 2013. Now, the Russian billionaire inventor of Telegram left Russia more than 15 years ago, but he is still a Russian citizen, and he currently owns more than 20% of Telegram, and therefore Telegram would be eligible for App Store elimination if this bill were to become law. This will not stop at TikTok. And someone who helped Mike Gallagher write this thing knew it. Here's Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky.
There were some people who were legitimately concerned that this was an overly broad bill, and they got an exclusion written into the bill that I want to read. It says the term covered company does not include an entity that operates a website or application whose primary purpose is to allow users to post product reviews, business reviews, or travel information and reviews. Why is this exception in the bill? Why did somebody feel like they needed this exception if the bill itself only covers social media applications that foreign adversaries are running?
And I thought that provision was weird too. But if a member of Congress can't figure out who slipped in that exception and why, I have no chance of figuring it out. But it does go to show that members of Congress who bothered to read the bill know that this is a bill that goes far beyond TikTok. This is an expansion of presidential power. And they also seem to be aware that it might be unconstitutional because they also included a provision that says that if any part of the bill is determined to be invalid by the courts, then the rest of the bill, as much as possible, should still be enforced. And none of this is hard to see in this particular bill. As much as I love how many Congressional Dish listeners think I'm some kind of wizard for being able to understand bills, this one wasn't hard. And what's frustrating is that it was crystal clear that plenty of people in Congress didn't take the time to read the 16 pages before voting on this facilitator of fascism. Here's the most ridiculous example of that. Here's Republican Representative Kat Kammack of Florida, who described herself in another part of this speech as a constitutional conservative.
We aren't banning a company as the high-paid lobbyist for ByteDance, which is owned by China, would lead you to believe. We aren't infringing on constitutionally protected speech or growing the size of government. All we're saying is break up with the Chinese Communist Party.
Except it absolutely does grow the power of the government, the president of the government, to be exact, to use a roundabout way to ban websites, apps, games, and other communications tools by punishing American companies who provide those companies essential services. And so it doesn't matter if you think the Chinese Communist Party is headed by the devil himself, and if you think that TikTok is Hamas propaganda that's injecting brain worms into all of America's youth. This bill is not about TikTok. Not really. This bill is using the threat that might exist via TikTok. Because again, there's been no proof provided to us showing that it's an actual national security threat. But this bill is using that concern, which I will call a legitimate concern, but it's using that concern to create a power to remove communication tools from the internet that the government, that the president does not currently have. Which is why the American Civil Liberties Union wrote a letter to Congress saying, quote, HR 7521 is censorship, plain and simple, unquote. And I see it the same way. This is an expansion of censorship powers. The power to censor the ability of entire platforms to be accessed in the United States. If we allow the Senate to pass this, I believe we will regret it in the same way we now regret the Patriot Act. In fact, I'm convinced of it. But the good news is we still have time to stop it. The Capitol switchboard number is area code 202-224-3121. You should save that in your phone if you haven't already, as it is the number to call to get in touch with your representatives in Washington, D.C. But because this is already past the House of Representatives, you only have to make 2 phone calls this time, one to each of your senators, because they are our last hope of stopping this expansion of uncheckable presidential power from becoming law. Oh. Good luck to us all. So today I would like to thank our executive producer, Brian Gilbert. He put an executive producer credit on episode 287, War Money, and I'm very happy that we have an EP on this already. Brian sent a message in with his executive producer credit that says, hey, I'm pretty sure I've earned an executive producer credit by now. I've contributed via paper checks ages ago and more recently via Zelle. I'd like you to make me an executive producer on 287, please. I'm 17 minutes in and already this is clearly important. Thank you, Brian Gilbert. Well, I love that you put your credit on this. If you're not aware of what the executive producer credit does, an executive producer credit is your way of vouching for an episode, saying that you are willing to invest in the episode itself. And so it costs $535, as Brian has done. You can do this cumulatively, or you can do it all at once. But every time you put an executive producer credit on an episode, it moves that episode up the most valuable episodes list on congressionaldish.com. Because for years, people have asked me, oh, hey, I know you've done hundreds of these episodes by now. Where should I start? I don't feel like I should be the person to tell you where to start. So this way, our actual investors in this podcast are the ones who are determining what the most valuable episodes are. And I am glad to see that War Money is moving up the list because I also consider that episode to be one of the most important that I've done, especially right now as the War Money bill is still being considered in this Congress. It has passed the Senate, and right now it is just sitting there collecting dust in the House. That episode is... I've got to say it was the hardest one I've ever done. And I do have a follow-up to that episode. So if you haven't heard it already, in that episode, I made the case of why I am viewing the ongoing assault on Gaza by Israel, Gaza and the West Bank, actually. The assault on the Palestinians by Israel. I am viewing what is happening right now as a continuation of a cycle of violence that stems from an ongoing, over 100 years long land grab by the government of Israel. And there has been some recent news out of Gaza that is only furthering my confidence in that hypothesis. The Wall Street Journal just reported that Israeli forces are using bulldozers to flatten farmland and to demolish Palestinian communities in order to create what Israeli officials are calling an exclusion zone, which Palestinians will not be allowed to enter in their own territory in Gaza. The exclusion zone is expected to create a no man's land in Gaza that is half a mile wide along its entire border. And keep in mind that Gaza is tiny. In some locations, Gaza is less than 4 miles wide. And so if this plan is completed, it would remove a full 16% of Gaza's usable land from the people of Gaza, and it would be under the control of Israel. On top of that, Israel is almost finished building a 4-mile-long road exclusively for the use of the Israeli military that will cut Gaza in half, which concerns me because the building of roads has been a key strategy used by Israel in the West Bank to chop up Palestinian communities and cut them off from one another. And it is just absolutely insane to be watching this happen in real time and to watch the world do nothing to stop it. And so all that is to say that I think that episode is one of the most important I've ever produced. And I think knowing that information, because as I said in the episode, I had to do a lot of reading to truly understand the situation. I had to watch documentaries. I mean, I took months to make that episode. I think understanding that context is helping me understand what's happening in real time. And as I see updates like this, it doesn't make me happy, but it does make me feel, I'm going to call it calm, a sense of calm in at least understanding what I'm seeing. It feels less like chaos. And even though I'm horrified by it, it helps to understand it. So thank you, Brian, for putting your credit on that. I hope other people will do the same. Yeah. Thank you. I also wanted to let you know that if you don't have to be producing this episode via Patreon. Patreon's a per episode way of paying for this show. But while I was on hiatus and researching the War Money episode, specifically the Israel-Palestinian history, it took me months to do that. And in the middle of those, I did create a bonus episode that I talked about on We're Not Wrong, but I didn't actually tell you here on Congressional Dish. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up that I produced the most personal bonus episode I've ever produced. On November 6th, 2022, I stopped drinking alcohol, and it wasn't something that I planned to do. I just decided I was done. But in that episode, I actually go through the decisions and like the steps and the events that led up to that decision, and then what it's been like to move away from an alcohol-filled life in a society that is still, alcohol is everywhere. It's central to so many of our celebrations and even just hangouts. And it was an adjustment for me to go from being a drinker to a non-drinker. And what I have found, it actually just happened again with someone that I know and love. But I have found that there are people who are also considering what it would be like if they stopped drinking alcohol, aka poison, for fun. I know that when I was going through this, I wanted every detail of why people quit, how they quit, what do you drink instead, what has it been like socially. I just had all the questions, but I felt very weird about asking them. And so what I decided to do is, while it was fresh in my head, and as I'm moving away from it being a struggle, I feel like at this point, it's been a little over a year, and I just don't drink anymore. It's really not something that I consider hard at this point. But for a while I did. And so while that was fresh in my head, I decided to make an episode with every detail so that instead of you having to ask me or being afraid to ask me, it's already out there for you. And I don't even have to know about it. You can listen to it. And if it helps you or someone you know, great. Because one of the things that I definitely leaned on was celebrities who had told their stories on podcasts and YouTube videos and lots of reels on Instagram. And I really leaned on other people who had told their stories publicly that I could listen to anonymously and pick up tips for how to do it myself. That episode is called Becoming Boozeless. It is on the Congressional Dish Patreon, and I did make it free, so it is accessible to everyone, not just the people who pay me. I didn't want to paywall that. So yeah, if you're someone who's interested in not drinking booze anymore, I can tell you that even though I can't say that I have been like happy all the time, especially since October 7th, the world has been very depressing, but I can tell you that I'm dealing with everything better. I feel better. I just feel better. I'm less anxious. It's been a really good decision, and I can't say that it's all that hard. I know that there are definitely people that feel like they have a drinking problem and it's a struggle to quit and all that stuff, but that hasn't been my experience. I actually don't want to drink anymore. And that episode explains why in more detail than most people actually want or need. I don't know, but it's there if you want to hear it. Okay, I am going to go celebrate my birthday. I'm going camping with some friends, and then we're going to see if the rest of the government gets funded on March 22nd. What I've heard through the DC grapevine is that most of the bills are done, but the Department of Homeland Security is what might send us into a shutdown. Who knows? But Claire and I are looking into the 6 funding bills that have already passed. We will look at these new ones, and that's going to take us a minute. So I will be back in April with information about those. Until then, take care of yourselves. And that's it. All right. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later. Bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite of any in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, in the end will justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent common sense, bipartisan solutions that actually solve problems.